And we're back, class. Shane's got his marks right here. He decided to scribe his line. As you can see, a line down from the top, right there, comes all the way over to here, comes down to here, comes down to here. That is where our window is, okay? So we can throw our next sheet of plywood down since we've already got this marked. We're gonna talk about what side of plywood we have facing out. The side of the plywood I'm standing on here, guys, is significantly rougher. This is made to grip your shoes if this was on a roof. Shane, pop this sheet out real quick. You can see this side is nice and rough. This side and the back side, nice and smooth. This is not a side of the plywood we would want to be walking on if we were standing on a roof. This smooth side of the OSB, oriented strand board, is always the side that goes down or towards the interior of the house. So Shane, drop that piece down here because we still have to use this piece of plywood to square up the remainder of our wall. We know that the first piece that we went down is nice and square, but if I push it over there tight and I want to line all this stuff up, this section of the wall over here is still moving independently of this section because none of this stuff is nailed down yet. Now, how are we going to know where the other side of our window is out here when it comes time to cut this thing out? We're not. So what I'm going to have Shane do is I'm going to have him grab the saw, and he's going to cut out our window before we get started here. So Shane, grab the saw. We'll move this out of the way real quick. Now, because of the fact that look at where our lines are, right at the edges of our framing members here, Shane, set your depth. You only want to be about a tooth or maybe a quarter of an inch deep with our skill saw here. And he's going to do a combination. It's just a regular straight cut, and then he's going to have to plunge cut once he gets this. Yep, flip it all the way up. There you go. He's setting his depth, so he's just deeper than the plywood. And he's got his safety glasses on. And Shane's used a skill saw before. So he's going to make his top and his bottom cuts first. And make sure you got enough slack there. You do. Maybe I'll stand on this side over here. You might have to pull that guard up and out of the way first too, Shane, so you can get on your line. There you go. Go ahead. Because it's a round blade, Shane had to overcut it just a little bit right there to make sure it cuts all the way out. Now do the bottom quick, Shane. Same deal, and you can cut it by about a ½ inch or so. Shane's going to have to do a specialty cut. He's still got to cut this vertical line right here, but he's going to have to do a plunge cut to get the saw up. Now, we talked about a plunge cut when we were talking about the circular saw, and some of you guys that were in class with me actually got to do it. He's going to have to pull the guard back and sink that blade in right where it needs to be. So he's going to have to do a real good job of lining it up. So you can see he's looking, he's holding the guard back. And he's not going to start the saw blade while it's touching. He's going to start it and he's going to slowly lower it in there. And then he's going to cut it all the way up. And that's why they call it a plunge. He's going to plunge down through his material. Ready? Keep going. There you go. And boom, just like that, Shane has passed it, and we have our window cut out right there. Now, you might ask, why is that so important? Because when we stick this next sheet up against there, we need to be able to find the other edge of that window also. Notice we didn't try and go and cut that piece of plywood before we put the cut that window out of the piece of plywood before we put it on the wall, just because I want to make sure everything stays perfectly square, okay? Squareness is much more important to me than having this stuff cut beforehand. As long as we're following the good order of operations here, it should be very accurate. So what Shane's going to do now is he's got to tack down his next sheet of plywood. So he's already ahead of me here, getting the bottom all flushed up. Now, I don't want to necessarily flush this plywood up with the bottom of the wall as it sits here. I want to flush this piece of plywood up with the other sheet of plywood, because this plywood is squarer than our wall right now. And until all that plywood is tacked down, that's what we're using as a gauge to keep us nice and square. So he's going to start at the same corner he started last time. And this is definitely a partner job, guys. Here, Shane, hold on before you drive it in, Shane. Pop that nail out real quick. I want to give you guys a little bit of a trick of the trade. Shane, if you come to my side over here, switch spots with me. And if you drive that nail in at an angle a little bit slightly back towards you this way, look at the angle he's going to drive it. You don't even have to be that much, Shane. But what that will do is that will pull that plywood over tight to the plywood that's sitting right there. You probably even have a chance to see it move a little bit there. Great. That looked perfect. Now, what does our bottom say right here? Our bottom says, oh my gosh, we're hanging over a whole bunch. Not a real big deal. Shane, come up to the top for me. We're going to drive this puppy in nice and tight in the middle of our stud there, because I know this piece of plywood now is lined up perfectly square with that next piece of plywood. Okay, if you want, Shane, you can do one on top and bottom of the windows right there also, while I'm going over here to check. All right. As soon as Shane's done with that, I'm going to start talking. That's okay, just pound her flat. There you go. All right, so our piece of plywood is set there right now. Guys, I'm gonna stop this video and I'm gonna come back in just a minute.